Moin, ihr wunderbare Menschen des Interwebs. Ich begrüße euch ganz herzlich zurück zu meinem Let's Play von The Great Ace-Attorney Chronicles. Wir sind hier stehen geblieben mit dem Battle of Garrideb und werden uns nun einmal anhören, was die beiden zu sagen haben. Und ich hoffe so sehr, dass diese Theorie richtig ist. Ich fände es wirklich schade für die arme Frau, für das Opfer, aber wenn das wirklich so sein sollte, dass das Buch zuerst geflogen kam, die sich gebückt hat, um das Buch aufzuheben und dann kam das Messer hinterhergeflogen und ist so in den Rücken gelangt, das wäre halt wirklich unlucky. Also, so einen Unfall zu haben, wäre schon echt tragisch eigentlich. Yes, on the day you were referring to, the wife and I did have a bit of a skirmish. Can't recall the reason now. Knocked the candlestick over and set fire to the carpet. Soon had it out, though, and got the window open.
Meanwhile, I was picking up whatever I could find to throw at him.
Plenty of knives around our place. Can't say I would notice if one or two went missing, I'm afraid. If that body thing in the victim's bag really was one of ours, you will have a job proving it, I think. It sounds as though it was quite the battlefield in your household that evening. Although an entirely one-sided assault, it seems. The enemy caught us on the hop, sir. Had no choice but to dig in and take defensive measures. To be honest, if the enemy had kept shelling us for another minute, we would have been toast. Of course, a veteran such as myself is only too aware that on every battlefield you're just a gnat's whisker from death at any moment. Are we still talking about a marital quarrel here? Well, I must say, I'm dubious that this testimony will shed any light on the origins of this jackknife. In combat, one's focus narrows such that surroundings are barely noticed. These witnesses may not be able to offer anything more than they have testified already. This may be a dead end. Van Zieks may well be right.
Well, whatever the chances, we only have this last cross-examination to uncover the truth, Mr. Naruhodo.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Very well, Counsel. Begin your cross-examination. Okay, dann schauen wir mal, ob wir etwas aus den beiden hier rausbekommen. Okay, yes, on a day my wife and I had a bit, can't recall the reason now. Knocked the candlestick over and set fire to the carpet. Soon had it out though and got the window open. And the fire also spread to some items of furniture, didn't it? The bookcase, my armchair, anything of mine really. Just so happens there was some bathwater around that evening, so I sloshed that about to put it out. A most precarious situation you put yourself in. Ours is a three-story townhouse on the west side of the street, where the water main isn't connected yet. Have to draw water from a public water pump during the day if you need any, you see.
The Lodgers are always moaning that they can't get any water at night. Also, that little mustard Japanese man buys water in bottles, I believe.
That offended Mr. Natsume, you mean?
Yes, he receives his stipend for his studies, you know, from his home country. Can you imagine being able to brew a pot of tea at all hours? He's obviously very well off.
Have you actually seen the state of the man?
I believe he uses all of his income to buy books.
Well, anyway, the point is I was able to dose the fire with water, fortunately enough. Okay. Well, I was picking up water I could find to throw at him. Meanwhile, I was picking up whatever I could find to throw at him, not water. Ich muss einmal ganz kurz anders hinsetzen. Even though the room was on fire?
As far as I was concerned at the time, it was more important to extinguish my anger than the flames. When a woman wants to throw, she must throw. That is most certainly not true of a Susato takedown, Mr. Naruhodo.
How did you know I was thinking that? So, please cast your mind back and try to remember. Was a knife among the items that you threw at your husband that day?
In all honesty, I don't recall, but I feel I must point out that I'm no monster. Let me see. Some bread, a cabbage, garlic, a towel, and a sponge, and a napkin.
Huh? Do you have something to add, sir? Mr. Garrideb. Don't shoot! Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. Did your wife's remark just now bring something to mind? Nothing of any significance, no. Just that the barrage of projectiles the old thing launched in my direction was somewhat more solid than she implies. Books, bricks, and the fire poker, I seem to recall. And the woman's aim is uncanny. She landed a direct hit with... Good grief, woman, we are not at home now. This is a court of law.
Oh dear me, ever so sorry, dear.
What's she even doing with a teapot in here?
Honestly, John, I would never have thrown such things at you, obviously.
Well, take a look at this then. How do you suppose that happened, hmm? Your pipe, sir. Had this thing in my hand as usual at the time of the onslaught. Knocked it clean out with one of her soft projectiles, she did, yes. And when I went to pick the thing up, it was broken in two. I would like to see a sponge do that sort of damage. I see, your pipe was broken. It would never have been sent flying unless it was hit by something pretty solid. Anyway, I have managed to bandage the thing up for now.
You are one to exaggerate, aren't you, dear?
I wonder what we should make of this account. Could be important. The defense believes Mr. Garrideb's remark just now to be of great significance. This war veteran's words only tell us one thing. Betrayal of a fiery wife and pipes, as well as hearts, may be broken. Sentimental wisdom perhaps, but hardly worthy of adding to the formal testimony. Indeed, common sense, one might say. Might one?
In that case, would you at least permit us to examine the pipe, sir?
Well, I don't see why not.
Oh, dearie me, there you go again, trying to ingredit yourself with a young lady.
Very well, the court will accept the gentleman's pipe as evidence. Okay, the pipe has been entered into the court records. Dann schauen wir uns die gleich mal an.
I hope I didn't speak out of turn, Mr. Naruhodo. I was just feeling rather disappointed for you that your request was turned down.
Oh no, it's fine. Thanks to Susato-san, we have some new evidence to work with. We should examine it carefully. Well, thank you for that, Repagil, Mr. Garrideb. Now, if we could return to the crux of the matter. What can you tell the court about the knife used to attack the victim? Gut, bevor das hier weitergeht, möchte ich einmal mir die Pfeife angucken. It looks to be in a sorry state with that bandage around it, doesn't it? But for some reason it feels slightly ominous to me, like it's trying to shoot out a warning. Probably shout out a warning. Probably because it's the same blue as Mr. Garrideb's dressing gown.
I suppose it must have considerably sentimental value to Mr. Garrideb, given that he's gone to the trouble of repairing it like this.
Either that or he can afford to replace it. There's a small nick out of the bowl here, look. It appears to have been made relatively recently.
See how there are little scrapes and dents all over it? It's clearly a well-loved pipe.
Yes, you're right. It seems to me recently that being well-loved goes hand in hand with getting some battle scars. This particular nick is catching my eye though, because it's clearly new. Something just twinkled inside the chamber of the piper here. Pipe here, mein Gott.
Yes, I saw it. Something stuck in there, I think.
Let's turn it over and give it a shake. What's this?
It's a tiny fragment of metal.
It looks like the tip of a blade or something. The tip of a blade? Surely it couldn't be... Okay, a fragment of metal has been entered into the court record. This small piece of metal looks like it might be the tip of a knife blade. It was stuck inside the bowl of Mr. Garrideb's pipe. Okay. Dann werde ich mir jetzt einmal das Messer angucken. Aha.
Oh, look here, Mr. Naruhodo, just at the tip. A small piece of the blade appears to be missing.
Wait, part of it's missing? I could be wrong, but I've just got a feeling... You remember this?
That's a tiny fragment of metal that we found inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe.
Yes, and just maybe...
Oh my, it's a perfect fit.
Somehow I just knew it. Alright, damit haben wir den Beweis, den wir brauchen. Dann würde ich... Plenty of knives around, can't say I would notice one or two went missing, I'm afraid. If that body thing in the victim's bag really was one of ours, you will have a job proving it, I think. Genau, und das werden wir jetzt tun. Und zwar präsentieren wir hier das gebrochene... Nee, ich will es nicht einsammeln. Erwerb. Mr. Garrideb, could I ask you to take a good look at this, please? You can ask, but I can't see a body thing. You can't? Used to call me Dead-Eye Deb back in the regiment, of course, but that was some time ago now. Even when I'm trying to enjoy a large print book by the fire these days. I struggle to tell a B from a D and a P from a Q, to be honest.
Oh, he does, dearie me. It's rather worrying being asked about every other letter and every other word.
You must be very dizzy. What is that? A tiny scrap of metal? Yes, almost certainly from the tip of a blade. And what may appear at first to be just a tiny scrap is in fact a crucial piece of evidence. Interesting. And where did the defense come by this evidence? It was lodged in the chamber of Mr. Garrideb's pipe. My pipe, you say? By Jove, I wonder how that got there. And what precisely does this fragment of metal signify, Counsel? Are you suggesting that it is in some way related to the matter of the stabbing on Briar Road? I am. What? When put together with another piece of evidence already in the court record, I believe this tiny fragment of metal will unravel the whole truth of this case, my lord. Okay, sein Bademantel ist auch noch angesenkt. You appear rather confident in that extraordinary statement, Counsel. Very well done. Present the pertinent evidence to the court. What evidence, when paired with this fragment of metal, allegedly reveals the truth of this entire case? Das Messer. This is the knife that was found on the victim's back. If you look closely, you will see that there is a small piece at the tip of the blade that is missing. A common issue with the inferior blades sold at unsavory street markets. Criminals who use them regularly leave the tips lodged in their victims' bones. And what of this particular knife? No doubt its tip has suffered a similar fate, now languishing somewhere near the spine of the victim. No, that's not the case. The tip of this particular knife's blade is the very fragment of metal we discovered in the chamber of Mr. Garrideb's pipe. Good grief, Lord von Zieks. I don't believe it. The knife from the crime scene and this fragment of metal are a perfect match. Is this some sort of Eastern sorcery? This is no magic, my lord. This is a miracle. A miracle? So Von Zieks has figured it out, has he? Counsel, explain this extraordinary coincidence at once. Yes, my lord. The crucial point we have to ask ourselves here is when did the fragment of metal find its way inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe?
Something that was clarified for us in the most recent witness testimony.
Had this thing in my hand as usual at the time of the onslaught. Knocked it clean out with one of her soft projectiles she did, yes. It would never have been sent flying unless it was hit by something pretty solid. Oh dearie me. During the argument between these two that occurred just as the victim was on the pavement below, Mrs. Garrideb flung this knife at her husband. However, the knife missed Mr. Garrideb, instead striking the pipe in his hand at the time, which caused the tip to break off, of course. Good lord! Yes, and that is when the tiny tip of the blade found its way inside Mr. Garrideb's pipe. The chances of that are 1,000,000 to 1. And yet there is no other credible explanation for how the tip of the blade ended up in your pipe. Then, after losing its tip, the knife ricocheted off the pipe and flew out of the open window. In short, this knife, which fell from the window of the Garrideb's house, is the very same knife that struck the victim in the middle of the back on the street below.
Oh gosh, oh dear.
A full-bodied theory, I will give you that. A complex bouquet of seemingly trivial points plausibly arranged to create an almost passable vintage. Allow me to toast my learned friend's characteristically Nipponese approach to bottling his argument. Sorry. But after all, it is just a theory. The bottle, I fear, is corked. Because you see, it's spoiled by an insurmountable inconsistency. Lord von Zieks, explain yourself. What is this inconsistency you claim to have identified? An inconsistency of the simplest nature, my lord. The victim was found with the knife planted in the middle of her back. Yes, in her...
Ow. That's right, you silly little man.
Oh, Juan, old thing, what are you getting so excited about? Let us consider the basic facts of the case once more. The victim was walking along the pavement before being stabbed in the back and falling to the ground. If the knife that struck her had fallen from above, there is no possible way it could have planted itself into the victim's back. Doch, wenn das Buch zuerst da war und sie hat sich gebückt, das Buch aufzuheben.
Quite right, you see, that's exactly right. If the knife had fallen on her from above, it would have struck her on the top of her head.
Well, it would appear the defense has made rather spectacular blunder. If a theory has ever even one inconsistency, it cannot stand. Your theory, my learned friend, is history. We were so close. I could see the truth. I was so sure we were on the right track. But now the way has been blocked completely. By just one simple inconsistency. Or in other words,
we simply need to eliminate that one inconsistency and the theory will stand.
Miss Susato.
You mustn't worry, Mr. Naruhodo. You were just caught off guard, that's all. And your mind went blank. But if the path you were on is indeed correct, then a way will present itself. The key to this is in the court record, I'm sure. All the information you need is there.
It seems you have nothing to say, my Nipponese friend. Well, your silence speaks volumes. A tactic acceptance that your theory is fatally flawed. This inconsistency doesn't mean I was on the wrong track. It means that I need to sharpen my mind and dig deeper for the truth. It's a test. Yes. If the knife fell on the victim from above, there's no way that it could have hit her in the middle of her back. Under normal circumstances, that is. What are you implying? Counsel? There is a piece of evidence in the court record that can explain this inconsistency, that can explain how the knife that fell from above could have pierced the victim's back. We already have the answer.
Goodness!
Utter madness. Surely this must be the last time. Counsel, present the evidence of which you speak. This is the last inconsistency, the final piece in the puzzle. If I can successfully make sense of this, the truth will be laid bare at last. Mein Gott, ich kann gerade überhaupt nicht lesen. The evidence that explains how the falling knife became lodged in the victim's back is das Buch. This, the fourth book found at the scene. This is the final piece of evidence the defense will present. A burned book? Is that not Mr. Garrideb's book? Yes, and to understand its significance, we have to consider how it came to be at the scene in the first place. This photographic print clearly shows the book in question, and the victim holding it in her hands. But as we all know, it was the police constable that put the book between her fingers like that. Quite so, as part of this wholesale transplanting of the crime scene to the opposite side of the road. That's true, however, as part of his testimony, Constable Beati made an extremely enlightening statement on that point. But what made you place that book in the victim's hand? Oh, well, sir, that's because that's how I found it. When we first ran over to the scene, the victim was already holding the book. So, when I moved everything, I made sure it was still in her hand. In other words, the victim had already picked the book up in her own volition. And clearly that must have been before she suffered the knife wound. Well, I should say so. After being attacked with a knife, I don't imagine she would have been doing much of anything. So the question becomes, why did the victim have that book in her hand? I think I'm beginning to see what may have happened now.
Oh, dearie me.
We know that the book fell from the top floor of the Garrideb household onto the pavement below, at precisely the moment that the victim was walking past. Yes, at exactly that moment, the young woman was walking along the street in the light fog, when all of a sudden, a book fell right in front of her.
The book I threw.
Yes, Mrs. Garrideb, and what do you think the woman did? What would you do if you were walking along and suddenly a book landed in front of you on the pavement?
Well, I really can't imagine it, but I suppose she might have reached down and picked the book up.
Yes, that is exactly what the woman in fact did. She picked up the book. And when the woman reached down to pick the fallen book up, what position would her back have been in? That's right, facing the sky, completely and utterly defenseless. Then, in the very next moment, while the woman was still bent over picking up the book, the next object fell from the room above, the jackknife, straight into the middle of her back. And at that same time, walking by chance directly behind Miss Green, was the defendant, Mr. Soseki Natsume. It appeared to Mr. Natsume that the woman simply collapsed on the floor. In the dark and the fog, he didn't see the knife falling on her from above. And from the other direction, the constable and his wife saw no one but the victim and her apparent attacker. So there never was a real culprit to run from the scene in the first place. No, this was nothing more than a series of unlikely events that culminated in an unfortunate accident. And that is the real truth behind this case. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Garrideb,
The very first time you showed me that knife, I had my suspicions. I wondered if perhaps it might have been something like that.
There, old bean.
Poor Mrs. Garrideb. Of course, I never meant for anything of the sort to happen, but it was all my fault, wasn't it? I take full responsibility. I let my anger get the better of me. I threw that book, and I threw the knife as well. John, dear.
It's alright, I know.
I am ever so sorry. Truly. I am sorry.
Lord von Zieks, what news of Mrs. Garrideb? She had been taken to the infirmary. It would appear that today's events had left her in an especially flustered state. However, I believe she will recover in due course. There is no cause for concern. Yes, unbeknownst to themselves, they caused what could easily have been a terrible tragedy. They shall have to prepare themselves for the consequences of their actions. There is some good news, however, my lord. I have just had word from the hospital where the victim is being treated. Her condition is improving steadily, and the doctor believes she will regain consciousness soon. It's strange. We've been talking about the victim all this time, but we have never once met her.
How wonderful! The woman is out of danger, it seems.
Yes, that is good news. So, Mr. Saseki Natsume? Yes. On behalf of my fellow countrymen, I would like to take this opportunity to beg your pardon, sir. You came from your distant eastern homeland to study our great British culture, and have been repaid with immeasurable unkindness. Please accept our heartfelt apologies. No, it is me who should be begging your pardon. Oh no, Mr. Natsume. That evening, when the young woman just collapsed on the pavement before my eyes, I jumped to the wrong conclusion again in my confusion. What conclusion, sir? I was sure that the woman was dead.
Yes, Constable Beati said the same thing, didn't he? He thought she had been killed too.
I suppose she must have looked completely lifeless. It's been about a year since I arrived in Great Britain now, but I still can't get used to life here. I can't relax. I'm sure there are evil spirits lurking in the fog, like they are haunting me. Poor Saseki-san. His imagination really has got the better of him.
Yes, poor man.
So when it happened, I thought the young woman had been taken by the fog spirits. I should never have dropped my books like that and ran away. I should have called for help, for a doctor, for the police. Instead, I've managed to create a rift in the relationship of trust between our two empires, and for that I am truly sorry. One could indeed say that some sort of mischievous spirit has been at work here, I think. One that created a chain of unfortunate mishaps. We were befooled by this spirit and led to false conclusions. But thanks to Lord von Zieks and our young lawyer here from the east, that chain has now been broken and the spirit exorcised. Exorcised? I heartily commend you both. Oh. Now then, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Yes, my lord. In concluding this trial, I must ask one last time for your decisions regarding the defendant's culpability. Are you ready to present your findings to the court? As the foreman of this jury, I can assure you we have reached a fair and just conclusion.
I do declare the truth can be extremely cruel at times.
Well, I didn't suspect the woman next to me, that's for sure. Sitting in for the old bean while she's out of action, you know, but I know what her decision would be. Does this mean I finally be able to get out of here and start work? Well, it's about time. I say I will have a corker of a story to tell the grandchildren when I get home, won't I? Very well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I hereby demand your final decisions. Mr. Foreman! Very well, Mr. Saseki Natsume, I hereby pronounce you not guilty. Ich finde das so cool, dass ich wirklich mit allem recht hatte, wo wir noch eigentlich mitten in der Verhandlung waren. Aber das für mich auch tatsächlich die einzige Erklärung, eigentlich schon vor der Verhandlung. Ich habe vor der Verhandlung einfach lustigerweise gesagt, oh ja, die hat nicht nur Bücher geschmissen, die hat auch das Messer geschmissen und das Messer fiel aus dem Fenster und hat die Frau getroffen. Da habe ich eigentlich tatsächlich das nur aus Gag gesagt, weil ich eigentlich nicht gedacht habe, dass das stimmt. Aber als es dann immer wirklich mehr der Wahrheit entsprochen hat, da dachte ich mir, okay, ja, dann kann das nur noch so sein, dass sie dann das Buch aufgehoben hat und in dem Moment, wo sie so sich vorgebeugt hatte, kam das Messer von oben. Es war. Es ist aber wirklich unglücklich. Also so ein Messer in den Rücken zu bekommen, ist wirklich absolut unglücklich. And finally, Mr. Natsume. Oh, yes, Lord, sir. You are now a free man once more. It is my hope that you will continue to further your education in British culture. And may you never again be brought before me. Oh, yes, sir, of course. On my life, I swear I will never set foot in a courtroom again. Transported to tears. Thank you, counsels. Court is adjourned. Oh. Wait, you mean me? Of course! Is there another locum here? Is there even one?
Compared to the original locum student, Mr. Naruhodo, your name has become rather short, hasn't it?
What's wrong with using my actual name?
Oh,
at last I'm free! I'm free! Joyful, joyous, jubilant, jubilation! Heady, hearty happiness, hurrah!
Oh, I'm pleased. Mr. Natsume is delighted.
Would it be so hard just to say that then? Locum, you did it! You saved me from the brink! Well, what happened to the poor woman was in no way your fault after all. I am just glad everyone can see that now. No, not that! Lovely, loyal locum lawyer! Yes? I mean, as I said before, I have just never got used to life here in Great Britain. Every time I look over my shoulder, I see foreigners, I see towering brick buildings, and from high up windows I see them looking down on me laughing, look at that little hunchback.
Oh dear, I'm sure it's all in your head, Mr. Natsume.
But today, you locum lawyer gave my gloom the boot. You stood firm behind the burial bench before all these babbling British. You battled to the bitter end, laying bare the baffling truth. And when I beheld the blinding fireworks among the beams of the Bailey roof, I bellowed, behold the best barrister ever born. Well, that's very flattering, and we are very pleased for you. This has given me a wonderful anecdote to recount to my old friends back in Japan. An anecdote? Is that what's to become of all my hard work? Oh, there you are, my dear fellows. I apologize for keeping you waiting. I rose late this morning.
Oh, Mr. Sholmes, what a pleasure to see you.
I see I am here, not a moment too soon. A disaster has been averted, I'm glad to say. The trial shall begin presently, Mr. Naruhodo, and I wish you the very best of luck. It's just finished. What? No! Then my haste was in vain? It's you, Sherlock Sholmes. Oh, have you met, sir?
This is Mr. Natsume, the man you had arrested, Mr. Sholmes.
Ah, I see. I failed to recognize you at first. Our previous encounters have taken place in the gloom, either of your bleak lodgings or the prison cell. I simply couldn't place a curious face in the light. Charming. This is all your fault, Sherlock Sholmes. You're the reason I had to go through this terrible ordeal. I am going to give you a piece of my mind. My apologies, sir, but I assure you, I have placed you now. You're the fellow who abandoned that poor young lady and ran off, are you not? Had she been taken to the hospital more urgently, I feel perhaps she would have regained consciousness by now. But it was unavoidable, I'm sure. We are but human after all. Anyone would have been shaken by such an experience. I do feel very badly about how I behaved. Well, never mind. Now then, what was it that you wanted to say to me, sir? Nothing. Priceless. Oh, I'm sorry, really, but... that was quite priceless. Poor Soseki-san. Still, on the bright side, you've had an extremely entertaining experience without paying a penny. And it would seem you were not even found guilty. But there is no bright side.
Whatever do you mean, Mr. Natsume?
Even after this, I'm still cursed. By the spirits, and now by the Reaper. Ah, Lord Van Zieks. I haven't forgotten, you know, what facing that man in court means. Even if you're found not guilty, you are still doomed.
It will be alright, Mr. Natsume. If the Reaper appears trying to make trouble, I will protect you. Hiya!
Wieso muss immer ich derjenige sein, der umgeworfen wird?
With a perfectly executed Susato takedown.
Much as I like being turned on my head, a bit of warning might be nice next time, Miss Susato. So, Mr. Natsume, what do you intend to do now? You mentioned something about recounting your experiences to your friends back in Japan. Yes, I intend to return to my homeland soon. It has already been a year since I arrived in Great Britain. I have visited universities, libraries, bookshops. I've been honored with the tutelage of professors. I have learned so much about the wealth of literature here and the city it has shaped. And I've come to realize that it is my calling to sail home and tell my fellow countrymen about it.
That's very touching, Mr. Natsume.
Or, in perhaps less veiled terms, you wish to withdraw halfway around the world to escape the terror of the Reaper's curse. That's not it at all. The more I learn of literature, the more this strange feeling claws at my insides. I feel compelled to return to my roots and attempt to pen a work of my own. Oh, I see. A work of... literature? By Soseki-san. Could be an interesting read. Ich muss echt anfangen, das Wort zu googeln. Ich will wissen, wie man das ausspricht. What about Miss Susato and yourself, Mr. Naruhodo? Sorry, what about us? Will you return to Japan alongside your mustache compatriot? Why would we?
A week has not yet passed since we arrived in London, and only now does it feel as though we have finally found our feet.
And you are accommodated in a hotel at present, are you not? That's right, but we need to find lodgings before it bankrupts us.
I have calculated we can only afford another 10 nights before our entire budget is exhausted.
Well then, you could take my lodgings. Oh, the windowless room? Oh, but what it lacks in windows, it more than makes up for with a floor, or a ceiling and walls. Great. And of course, I would be happy to leave behind the cursed evil spirit.
Oh my, an evil spirit?
Oh yes. It tries to suffocate you while you sleep. It's an infallible wake-up call. We will think about it, if that's alright. Perhaps I can offer a more welcome alternative. Would you consider taking lodgings with me?
Really?
Well, a vacancy has conveniently presented itself. Though it is up in the attic, I might add. Are you sure it isn't just a storage loft? I spoke with the landlady this very morning on the matter of price, and Iris is cleaning the room as we speak. You must come at once. I presume you have no luggage to speak of.
Ah, this is simply wonderful. What an honor to be invited to taking lodgings in the great detective's office attic. I'm too overcome for words.
So suggesting we look elsewhere is out then. Then it's settled. Iris will prepare a welcome dinner this evening. And you must come too, Mr. Natsume. I insist. I don't know what to say, but thank you and yes.
Wonderful. Then I will go and complete the paperwork for your formal release, Mr. Natsume. I shan't take long.
Somebody's happy. Oh, come. I knew that you wouldn't let me down. I am truly delighted to have met you here in London. Likewise, Mr. Natsume. It's been a privilege meeting you too. It's a shame that we are going to have to say goodbye so soon. Well, I've come to realize that I belong in Japan. But Locum, we will meet again one day. Yes, I'm sure. And hopefully by then, I will be a successful lawyer. Hopefully by then, I will be a successful author. Well, my dear fellow, our carriage appears to have arrived. Shall we go, Mr. Naruhodo? Yes, Mr. Sholmes. I have little doubt Mr. Natsume will be released in time for dinner this evening. And so, with Saseki-san's innocence successfully established, we rode with Mr. Holmes to what was to become our new home. 221B Baker Street. So this
Is to be our new office, yes.
our office? I rather like the sound of that.
Me too. It's simply wonderful, isn't it?
I hope you can see this, Kazuma. It's only a small step, but I would like to think we are getting a little closer to your dream now. So, my dear fellows, do you like the place? Ah, Mr. Sholmes. Yes, thank you so much.
It's a delightful room, Mr. Sholmes. I simply adore it.
Good, I'm pleased to hear it. Iris and I are delighted to welcome you.
I hope everyone's hungry. It's nearly time for dinner. We will eat as soon as Mr. Natsume arrives. We have a lot to celebrate. Iris, you must let me help you. Alright then. Susie, you can be in charge of the salad. Splendid.
So, Mr. Naruhodo, how does it feel to have your own office in the capital? It's very exciting, actually. I can't help wondering what adventures await us. Those were precisely my sentiments when I first established my office at these premises. Until I discovered the dark truth about the city of London, that is. Sorry? London is a glorious place full of wonder, opportunity, prosperity and mirth. But the brightest of lights casts the darkest of shadows. Ich muss übrigens sagen, dass jetzt hier so ohne seinen Mantel und ohne seinen Hut sieht er tatsächlich sehr viel besser aus. Shadows? What do you mean? Well, I believe you're well aware of the murkiness that lies behind London's facade already. So, once again, Mr. Naruhodo, welcome to London. Of course, at the time, I had no idea of the significance of those words Mr. Sholmes so casually spoke, but it wasn't long before my turn came to lift the facade and see the true depth of the murk that lay behind it. The end. Alright. Wir haben diesen Fall abgeschlossen, den vierten Fall, ich glaube es war der vierte Fall, ja, von The Great Ace-Attorney Chronicles, ein interessanter Fall auf jeden Fall. Was mir nur nicht gefallen hat, war eben der Anfang vom Fall. Also wir hatten zwar dann diese Ermittlungen, aber wir haben sehr viel geredet, wir haben wirklich so gut wie gar keine Hinweise wirklich gefunden und die meisten Hinweise gab es dann eben wirklich nur in der Verhandlung. Also die ganzen Beweise, die vorgelegt worden waren während der Verhandlung und wir an sich haben ja so gar keine Beweise wirklich gefunden, bis auf diesen Kaufbeleg von den Büchern von Mr. Natsume. Das war ja wirklich so das Einzige, was wir hatten als Beweis während unserer ganzen Ermittlungen und der Rest war nur während des Prozesses. Und das fand ich ein bisschen schade. Also ich würde es mir wünschen, wenn wir beim nächsten Fall bei den Ermittlungen auch wirklich viele Hinweise auch selber vielleicht finden und nicht wieder alles erst in der Verhandlung bekommen, weil so hat es sich nur so angefühlt, als hätten wir bei den Ermittlungen, wir hätten einfach nur geredet. Natürlich hat es uns geholfen, also das Wichtigste haben wir ja eigentlich während der Ermittlungen rausgefunden, also dass Mrs. Garrideb da zigtausend Sachen nach Mr. Garrideb geworfen hat. Aber das war's dann auch schon. Also so mehr war dann eben auch nicht. Natürlich, es war der Schlüsselpunkt, um den Fall zu lösen. Aber trotzdem würde ich mir eben mehr Interaktion wünschen bei den Ermittlungen, dass wenn wir uns wirklich umgucken überall, dass wir eben auch belohnt werden mit mehr Hinweisen und vielleicht auch Beweisen. Trotz allem war ein sehr, sehr interessanter Fall, ein sehr schöner Fall, ein sehr tragischer Unfall nach wie vor. Und ich bin gespannt, wie es weitergeht mit dem nächsten Fall, was uns dort erwarten wird. Wie immer bedanke ich mich ganz herzlich fürs Zusehen. Hoffe, ihr hattet Spaß. Und wenn ihr mögt, sehen wir uns sehr, sehr gerne im nächsten Part wieder. Bis dahin. Ciao.